In this video, we are going to wrap up our Topic 7 review. Please remember, your test is on Wednesday. You will have a 24-hour window to complete your test, and you will also need to upload your work in Focus in order to receive credit. Now, typically, if you're in the physical classroom, you would not have notes for this test. You would not have a unit circle. You would not have any kind of reference. So what I need for you to do in order to show that we have mastered the standards is show the work like I'm going to show it to you today in this review. We're going to tackle 7.3 trigonometric functions and real numbers. And this is page 408 in your textbook. If you don't have the textbook, that's fine. I have a PDF copy of this located in Focus under the Topic 7 Test Review tab. So here we go, practicing problem solving. Find the sine and cosine for each angle. We're going to do 26 through 28. Now, in your notes, you should have this. I gave you this handy dandy little chart. These are your common reference angles. These reference angles make it super easy to determine a value on the unit circle. You will also need to understand your quadrants, whether cosine is negative or positive in a certain quadrant. Here it is for you. Now remember too, your ordered pairs like x, y, well, cosine relates to x and sine relates to y. Let's go ahead and do some problems. Looking at number 26, 4 pi over 3. What is beautiful about working with radians is if you just look in the denominator, that tells you what your reference angle is. I've got a 3 in the denominator, which means my reference angle is pi over 3. Now, if I have a reference angle of pi over 3, here's pi over 3. Cosine 1/2, sine is going to be square root 3 over 2. All we have to do now is determine, is cosine positive or negative? Is sine positive or negative? And that's going to depend on what quadrant it lies in. So we have 1/2 square root 3 over 2. Okay, so, oops, I already have it here, quadrant 3. Because if I rewrite pi with 3 in the denominator, 3 pi over 3, remember that's equivalent to pi, but that helps me determine exactly where 4 pi over 3 lies. So if I'm coming around this unit circle, well, here is 3 pi over 3, which means I have to go an additional pi over 3 in order to hit the terminal side of that angle. So this, theta equals 4 pi over 3. So that tells me I'm in quadrant 3. Well, if I'm in quadrant 3, remember too, x values, you are to the left of the y-axis, so cosine is negative. Your y values, your sine, under the x-axis, so sine is also negative. So that means the cosine of 4 pi over 3, here's cosine, but we know it's negative. It's negative 1/2. And here it's sine of 4 pi over 3. That is going to be a negative square root 3 over 2. Let's do another one using degrees. 135 degrees. Easy for me in degrees to find what quadrant an angle lies in. So if I'm going, here's my initial side, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Well, 180 degrees is too far. 90 degrees is going to be between 90 and 180 degrees. 135 degrees is greater than 90 but less than 180. So I know the terminal side of my angle lies in quadrant 2. If I am in quadrant 2, notice we are to the left of the y-axis. Cosine is going to be negative, but I am above the x-axis. So sine is positive. Now we have to determine the reference angle. Well, remember your reference angle is right here. It's based off of the x-axis, so we need to know what measurement this is. To do that, notice we are right before 180 degrees. So in order to determine this measurement, you would take 180 degrees minus 135 degrees, which gives you a reference angle of 45 degrees. And we know that gives me an ordered pair of square root 2 over 2, square root 2 over 2. You can use your chart. I've always found this is the one that's super easy to remember, 45 degrees or pi over 4. So cosine is negative, sine is positive. So that means the cosine of 135 degrees is a negative square root 2 over 2. And the sine of 135 degrees is a positive square root 2 over 2. And let's do one more, 5 pi over 6. Again, radians, reference angle. Look at your denominator. It's pi over 6, which means we have an ordered pair of square root 3 over 2 and 1/2. And again, feel free to use that reference angle chart that I gave you. Quadrant. Okay, so if I am, let's see, I'm at 5 pi over 6. Here's pi. Let's write pi with a denominator of 6. Well, that's 6 pi over 6. So again, I have not gone past 6 pi over 6. I'm going to be right before 6 pi over 6. 5 is less than 6. So that is going to be right in here. Here's your angle. This is theta equals 5 pi over 6. That is quadrant 2, which means if I'm in quadrant 2, we just did one in quadrant 2. Cosine is negative, sine is positive. So the cosine of 5 pi over 6 then is a negative square root 3 over 2. And the sine of 5 pi over 6 is going to be a positive 1/2.